All right, today we are diving into a true masterpiece, Don DeLillo's White Noise. This book came out way back in 1985, but it's all about the anxieties of a world just completely saturated with consumerism, with technology, and this constant hum of dread. And it all kicks off with a sound you can barely even hear. I mean, right from the opening pages, DeLillo just nails this incredibly unsettling tone. Our narrator, a guy named Jack Gladney, seems to have a totally normal suburban life, right? But even when he's asleep, he's being invaded by this inescapable noise. It's a huge clue that his world is just a little off-kilter, kind of dreamlike, and maybe already haunted. So where does a story all about modern dread even begin? Well, you might think a haunted house, maybe a dark alley, but no, it starts in the most ordinary place imaginable, the American supermarket. And let me tell you, for the Gladney family, this place is way more than just somewhere to buy groceries. What this quote is really getting at is that for the Gladneys, consumerism is practically a spiritual experience. The supermarket, it's their sanctuary. All that stuff, the sheer amount of it, it offers this deep sense of security, this feeling of fullness that they hope will keep the emptiness of modern life at bay. And at the center of this whole thing is the Gladney family. They're this blended, totally chaotic, and just deeply modern household. Their conversations are this amazing mix of regular family arguments and these super deep existential questions. You've got Jack, who's a professor of Hitler studies, but get this, he doesn't even speak German. Then there's Babette, his wife, who's obsessed with who's going to die first. And their kids are constantly just poking holes in their parents' whole perception of reality. It's brilliant. And it gets even deeper. Jack's friend, Murray, he even finds meaning in the generic brand section. With the flavorless, all-white packaging, he doesn't see that as an escape from consumerism. No, he calls it a new austerity, like it's some kind of spiritual agreement we've all made. It's just a perfect illustration of the novel's big idea. We can't stop ourselves from creating these belief systems around the stuff we buy. So, underneath all the bright lights of the supermarket and all the chaotic chatter in the Gladney house, there's this constant hum. This hum of anxiety. And that, right there, is the white noise from the title. It's this background frequency of fear. Fear of technology, fear of information, and most of all, fear of death. Okay, so check this out. This one simple question ends up sparking this huge central argument in the book. Jack, the dad, he looks out the window and he sees rain. Simple enough, right? But his son, Heinrich, completely refuses to trust his own eyes. And the reason why is pretty profound. In their world, all the data and media they're bombarded with has made reality itself feel totally uncertain. And this is the core conflict, what your own senses tell you versus what the data says. Heinrich's whole argument is that our senses just can't be trusted. I mean, how do you know it's just rain? What if it's sulfuric acid from a factory somewhere? What about all the sounds out there that are too high or too low for us to hear? See, he trusts the stream of information more than the physical world, and that perfectly captures the anxiety of the information age. And Jack, he totally internalizes all this anxiety. It just creeps into his mind. He starts wondering if industrial pollution is the cause of everything, from his son's receding hairline all the way to these weirdly beautiful sunsets they've been having. It's like technology has introduced this new kind of invisible death into their lives, this seeping poison in the air that you can't see but you're always afraid of. So where is all this data and information coming from? Well, if you ask Murray, the answer is simple: the television. And he's got this whole theory that TV isn't just junk entertainment. It's practically a religious force. He thinks commercials are like modern mantras, the jingles are sacred formulas, and that buzzing grid of little dots is a direct pipeline into our collective unconscious. It's just one more layer of noise that's constantly shaping what we think is real. So for the first half of the novel, all these fears are pretty abstract. They're philosophical. They're just the background noise. But then something happens. Something that takes that noise and makes it deafening, terrifyingly real. A train car derails, and it releases this massive, toxic cloud of a chemical called neodine, D. All of a sudden, that seeping death that Jack was so afraid of, it's not some vague anxiety anymore. It is a literal black, billowing cloud hanging right over his town. And you have to pay close attention to how the authorities manage this whole crisis, because the language they use is constantly changing. At first, they call the cloud a harmless, feathery plume.
Then, when they can't deny the threat anymore, it gets a scary technical name. Even the symptoms keep changing, getting stranger, more psychological. It's almost as if reality itself is being rewritten by the minute.
So, during the evacuation, in all the chaos, Jack gets out of his car to pump some gas. And in that moment, he's exposed to the toxic cloud for 2.5 minutes, 150 seconds. That number, that single piece of data, is about to completely define the rest of his life and his relationship with death. Okay, so after the event, the book's central obsession really snaps into focus. And the question is this: what even is death in an age of information? Because it's not just a biological fact anymore, it's become a data set. And this is what a technician literally tells Jack after plugging his 150-second exposure time into a computer. Death is now just a calculation. A machine analyzes your history, your genes, your whole data profile, and it just spits out a prediction. You're not a person anymore. You are the sum total of your data, and your death is just another number in the system. And just to make things even more bizarre, the whole disaster response is being run by a group called SimuVac. It stands for Simulated Evacuation. Their job isn't actually to handle the real disaster, but to use the real disaster as a practice drill for a simulated one. I mean, the line between what's real and what's a simulation just completely evaporates. So, how do people even begin to cope with all this? Well, Murray, of course, has a pretty chilling theory. He says humanity is divided into just two groups: killers and dyers. He thinks most of us are dyers. We just passively accept our fate. But killers, he theorizes, are the ones who try to beat their own death by killing other people, basically building up what he calls life credit. And this quote from him really summarizes the novel's entire perspective on death. It's not a private, personal thing anymore. No, it's become this public spectacle, something for scientists to study, a data point to be analyzed. And the more we try to analyze it and control it with our technology, the bigger and more powerful it becomes. It gets a life of its own. So, what happens when the immediate crisis is over? Well, the town is changed forever. And the book doesn't end with some neat and tidy resolution. Instead, we're left with this really strange, kind of haunting new normal. So the toxic chemicals that are just left hanging in the atmosphere, they start creating these unnaturally spectacular sunsets every single evening. And they're both beautiful and absolutely terrifying at the same time. A constant daily reminder of the disaster. Technology has permanently scarred nature, and in the process turned a toxic event into a tourist attraction. And the novel brings us right back to where it all began, the supermarket. But it's different now. The checkout counters have these holographic scanners that decode, as the book says, the binary secret of every item. And for Jack, this new language of waves and radiation, well, that's how the dead speak to the living now. It's this final chilling mashup of consumerism, technology, and death. And ultimately, that's what White Noise leaves us with. This really unsettling question. The book suggests that our media, our technology, it's not just describing our reality anymore. It's actually creating it. And in a world like that, the line between what's real and what's a simulation, between life and death itself, becomes dangerously, beautifully, and just irrevocably blurred.